This is the Real Digital Transformation podcast series, empowering technology and business professionals to succeed with digital transformation. Now, here's your host, best-selling author and series editor of the Pearson Digital Enterprise series, Thomas Earl.
Hi, this is Thomas Earl, and welcome to another episode of the Real Digital Transformation podcast series. Today I have with me Ghazenfer Mansoor, the CEO and founder of Technology Rivers. Welcome, Ghazenfer.
Thanks, Thomas. Glad to be here.
So today we're going to focus on the impact of AI on the healthcare industry, on the healthcare community, its operations, and maybe even social impacts. But what's the best place for us to begin that discussion, Ghazenfer?
So healthcare is evolving, and especially with the AI, a lot of new things are coming. Healthcare has been a little bit behind on the tech part. So, and then with all the sensitive data that healthcare deals with, the PHI data, there are a lot of concerns, a lot of worries about how AI is going to be impacting the healthcare data. How is my data safe? Is my data protected? How people are going to be using. So there are a lot of discussions around that topic. So this is one of the interesting topic, or I would say interesting time to talk about the AI in healthcare.
And we all understand how AI can be incorporated into any business to optimize workflows, to optimize decision-making, to provide generative capabilities, predictive capabilities. So there's a broad application for those types of features. But what have you observed specifically in the healthcare industry? What are the main types of applications that healthcare organizations are currently interested in?
So the biggest application needs that we are seeing is more on a predictability side. So there's a lot of data on the personal health, on the medicine and diseases, there's a lot of pharmaceutical data. So now AI is giving ability to do the deep research and providing more prediction of that data. It was not as easy before as it now. So this is where we are seeing a lot of demand, where people are bringing that data and they would like to see AI is predicting and giving a recommendation of based on the data that they have. At the same time, obviously, there's a lot of sensitive data. People have concerns about that. So there are different ways of implementing those. We can talk on those a little bit later. But you started with the workflow. That's another big one. A lot of those clinical workflows are being implemented now with AI. It used to be obviously a challenging topic, but now a lot more. That's where we're seeing a lot of demand, where people are doing a lot of those automation, creating those workflows and improving those workflows using AI.
And so workflow optimization, dealing with sensitive data and predictions all sound really vital to how healthcare needs to operate. So if we talk about the predictions, is it predictions primarily for medical diagnosis, looking at a patient's history and trying to predict the direction they're going in, or is it broader than that?
It's a combination. Every company is different, every type of organization. We are seeing a lot more on a personal health data. So, for example, you have a lab results, you have personal health history, could be your workout data, all that data, and you can use AI to get recommendation. Now, that's where the sensitive topic comes in terms of AI is providing recommendation. Is it legal, or is it a right to provide those recommendations? So that's where the fine line between how do you provide some kind of a recommendation that are still a recommendation, but not really like a legal, or because obviously every doctor is is not going to be just letting you or make decisions based off of that.
Mhm.
Uh, so one of the things that are coming in is like the human involvement. So let's say, for example, in one of our project, what we are doing is we're using all of the data, doing the deep research, providing recommendation, but then we share that with the provider, and provider is reviewing and optimizing those or updating those based off of that. But it's still giving a lot of data ahead of time to the doctor rather than they figure it out. So the
And s-
human involvement is key, that you don't want to just share any AI recommendation to the end users, because there's still a lot of hallucination in the
right,
data. AI always give you answer.
right, right,
So
right.
you want to make sure the data that's coming is right.
So a doctor could use an AI tool as to collect one opinion, but then use form their own opinion based on that. So it's just another type of input that they can receive before they themselves might diagnose a patient. Is it that simple?
That is true. That is true. And then in another application we're doing where it's a doctor consultation as well. So the doctor are sharing some information, and then AI is providing recommendation, but then it's also being shared with other providers who are reviewing it and giving their opinion on that recommendation. So a lot of different types of applications are being built.
How common is it now for the average family doctor to have access to an AI tool like that when meeting patients or trying to diagnose patients? Is it just something that's emerging, or is it relatively commonplace in some regions now?
I believe it's emerging. I'm not 100% positive how many types of applications out there. I'm not talking about you just loading in a Claude or ChatGPT. No, that's everybody's personal. And then that data is used for training the LLMs as well. So you cannot put any of that sensitive data into those. So
Right.
there are tools that are being built that make sure that sensitive data stays on your servers. It's not being used by LLMs to train. So there are rules. For example, you have to have the AI LLMs also signing the BAs so that they make sure the data is not being trained. And then there are different technical strategies that you could use. Like there's a RAG architecture where you're creating the data in chunks to your vector database, and then you're filtering the data and then giving AI for this for the answer. So a lot of those different strategies are being implemented. So doctors have access to any of these new tools that are coming. I don't know on top of my head how many of those are already out and good, because there's so much coming now. It's a very high time, I would say, for AI. A lot of new ideas are coming. So it's like any other tool. If you look at it, whether it's in healthcare or non-healthcare, there are so many coming. You have to keep. It's hard to keep track of those.
But I guess you could foresee a future where perhaps in like 5 or 10 years, there are industry standard tools that are approved by regulatory bodies that doctors will then just naturally use, commonplace, to enter patient history and then to have the AI produce predictions or recommendations based on that history and based on just a industry knowledge base of conditions and trends and things like that. Is that kind of where all this is headed?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as the rules are evolving, as you know, like the HIPAA regulations are pretty old. So with the all the new technology and new challenges, those need to be updated as well. So I'm sure in the coming months and years, there will be new regulations that will define some rules, because it's not really just the data, but then also kind of recommendation, would that be there's a biasness as well, there's a hallucination as well. So there'll be a lot of rules for sure coming that would drive these products. But yes, there'll be many of those that'll be approved following those certain regulations, and those could be the go-to platform for the doctors.
Okay.
And the amount of work being done or the kind of stuff that's happening, it's amazing.
Yeah. I mean, it looks like there's a lot of potential for this to really transform not just the industry, but the effectiveness of the industry using these tools. So that's patient diagnosis predictions. Are predictions also being used on a broader scale to perhaps predict contagious disease? Whether diseases are occurring in certain regions or spreading or predicting certain viruses and things like that. I'm sure tools are being used in labs, but on a broader scale across different countries and communities, is that also something that's emerging?
It is one of the good use cases. I'm not aware, especially outside US, I'm not paying much attention on that. Like, what are the different tools available? But this is something like even you talk about the disease spreadness. Like those are the things even we did before AI came, where we created those tools based on uh, the data on different social networks where people are reporting, oh, they have a cough, they have a flu, and obviously during COVID, the contact tracing, all of that, like when certain things are happening, then if you are going in a certain region, what's happening around that, you have to be cautious. Okay, let's say there's a flu zone, there's a certain contagious disease in a certain region. So those things have been worked on in the past, but now using AI, a lot more data is available. So those are becoming more and more mature. So, but it comes down to the data. So because AI is just gonna give you something based on the data available. So as long as you're tracking that data, you have all of the data, you're loading the data into AI and training that, you can get as more accurate prediction as possible.
Yeah, I can see really it changing so many ways that healthcare has been approached in the past. You brought up the obvious privacy and sensitivity concerns around medical data, patient data. I mean, a common approach in general to that type of privacy concern is to anonymize the data before it gets used for training and analysis purposes. Is that sufficient in healthcare to simply, take patient data or other sensitive records, anonymize them so that there's no personal identity associated with the data, but then to take that anonymized data and use it for training purposes? Is it that straightforward, or are there other concerns?
Yeah, that is a very common approach. Data anonymization is the very first step where you anonymize this, and based off of that, you get a lot of those recommendations. But then again, depending on a specific use cases, you may be using a different strategies. I mentioned earlier about the RAG, which is retrieval augmented generation, where you're storing all of the data, and now you are filtering the data based on the user input and then to the AI responses on that limited data. So you're still training. So I think the key part is where how are you training your data? So in many of those healthcare where there's a sensitive data, a lot of those trainings are based on the internal data. It could be your private LLM, so not on a public. So that's the part people are trying to avoid. Once you're doing things on the internal database where it's not being shared with others, then even if there is some kind of um, challenges in that, it's it's still it still works. So I'll give you one example. So for example, let's say you have a skin data, and that skin data is used to, let's say, analyze some skin disease. Now that data is, if a lot of that images are facial images, now it's very challenging because technically that is a PHI data. You could recognize the person based on their eyes,
That's
based on
right. Yeah.
certain parts of it. So now, and it's hard to anonymize that kind of a data. Now you do need a different strategy. That's where your private LLMs, your local models, where even if that data is there, that's you're not sharing outside, as long as it's following the HIPAA regulation, who have access to that data, who access it, what time, that kind of stuff. But if it's just a name, date of birth, some of those are easy to anonymize. Oh, male patient, this ethnicity, this age range. A lot of those things do work.
Right. And in terms of the data, the massive size of the data that must be necessary for some of these AI models to be properly trained, and also the diversity of the data from the US, data from Europe, data from other countries and continents. How is that approached? Is there a common method for healthcare organizations to collaborate, share data? Do they individually anonymize it and then share it to a central type of processing or storage location? Is there like a federated type of system in place that allows healthcare organizations to work together on that? Or so far, has it been more individual organizations doing their own thing?
It really depends on the specific organizations and type of the partnerships they have, because each approach would have its own, I would say, challenges and caveats. So depending on who's looking at data, who's training that data, so there's a cost associated with that. So depending on really their partnership. There are times when organizations are collaborating that data. So, for example, the insurance companies and healthcare organization, they're sharing the data all the time. Data between, let's say, Veterans Administration data versus the DoD hospital data and the private healthcare system. I personally worked on those projects where the data is being shared among different entities because these people are moving from one system to another one depending on where they are. So there are boundaries, but then what type of contractual uh, contractual restrictions they have, who can do what. So I think that goes into more on the data governance part and regulation side.
Okay. So we talked about the predictive capabilities. We talked about some of the data concerns. Before we move on to workflow and how AI might be applied to optimize or in other ways enhance traditional healthcare operational workflows, I just want to ask, the generative AI itself as a category of tools that many organizations, many companies are using for in business productivity purposes. Have you seen it being useful in the healthcare industry at all?
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. They are being used heavily. In fact, the example on the personal predictive health that I mentioned, we are using generative AI, and that's where these different strategies come in. That so using those public cloud does not mean they will use every data to train. So that's where the BAA comes in, business associate agreement. We have seen Google sign it. We have seen OpenAI sign it. So there are rules that you follow. So as long as they're signing the BA, they are committing to zero data retention policy. They're only going to use it for the purpose of solving that query or answering that query. and they don't use to train that data, train their LLM using this data. So, and then the RAG architecture that I mentioned earlier. So all these strategies are applied on these generative AI public cloud. So that's being used heavily.
Okay.
Because those are most costly, because the moment you move into the on-premise, that's where the costs are so high. Training AI model, it's very costly. A lot of heavy resource requirements. So it's not going to be practical for everyone. So only limited number of big healthcare system organizations with a decent amount of money would be able to achieve those. So for smaller, these public LLMs, generative AI is the way to go. So it's just that you have to follow certain rules, certain processes, certain architectural norms to build the healthcare. It's not like building any other application where you just upload the data and query AI. That's not going to work for healthcare.
Right. I mean, one case I've seen before is that it's being used to create synthetic training data, especially in cases where access to private data is limited or there's just insufficient patient data or medical data available for what the model needs to be trained for. Have you seen that?
So do you mind repeating that? Like what exactly?
Well, using generative AI to create synthetic data, to create artificial data, to supplement real data, to train a model so that it has more training data when there's insufficient training data to begin with, so that it's basically creating this artificial training data to give it more variety and diversity in the data being used to train the model. I'm just curious if you've seen that so far.
Yeah, I haven't personally seen it, but that seemed like a pretty good way of and generative AI is very popular for that kind of stuff. To using Claude and different tools, you can even get the code that could run on your data to simulate the same data or generate more of that data so that you could use for training. That's a very good use case for sure.
So finally, what are your thoughts and insights regarding how AI is being used or could be used to help improve healthcare workflows?
So healthcare workflows are the main, I would say, main use case that probably would continue to grow. And it's not about building just AI, but more about building the right workflows that solve those specific workflows. And then now AI is moving, so it's healthcare AI is moving toward, it's not about just using for one of those, but also creating some of those workflow with that also have some kind of a decision making, whether it's the agentic AI, whether it's the regular agent. That so, for example, for documentation, for any of those other flows, there are so many use cases. So those are the ones that are continue to be built and enhanced. So that's definitely the future where you will see the organizations who are building the workflows would or optimizing their workflows using AI would be the one that would have a differentiator.
Right. Okay. Super. Well, for those in the healthcare industry, learning about AI, and especially for healthcare organizations that are now seeing the necessity to take a close look at AI and adopt it for, wherever it may be applicable to the organization. What would your advice be? Like, where should they begin? How should they begin? What should they look out for? If you were talking directly to a CEO or a stakeholder or somebody, senior in an organization like that, what would you say to them?
So change is always difficult. And that's one of the pushbacks that we have seen any organization when we try to move on to AI. People are reluctant. They feel it may take away their jobs. So obviously, but that's not the case. AI is empowering people. It's not replacing people. So the one advice that we give to the CEOs or the founders or all the leaders is start small, start with simple workflows. Once people start seeing that it's benefiting them, they are more open to that. And gradually you start giving them more and more, and then gradually it's increasing their productivity. We always have more work than we can do. So now AI is helping you achieve more, do 10x more than before, and now you are a lot more empowered. And once people start seeing that they are more empowered and they can achieve more, they're more excited and they're more willing. And it gives more confidence to the organizations as well that they are not really just uh, building something with AI, but also that AI works for them. So starting with the smaller workflows, look at something, maybe a small bottleneck that in your organization that you could automate, start with that. And once your team see the benefit, then
Mhm.
they will be a lot more open to adoption. Because
Super.
AI is shifting from insight to execution. So the winners won't be the one with the smarter model, but the ones that embed AI into real countable workflows. And that you can only do when you can't be just make, let's say, oh, we'll do everything, because every time when you make this bigger project, those becomes uh, just challenging. So start with the small and
Mhm.
gradually go toward
Yeah,
building the remaining.
especially because of the potential scale of these workflows and how much data and how many other types of organizations or other parts of the healthcare, landscape they may need to integrate with an effect. I definitely think that's good advice to start small and see it in action before you roll it out on a larger scale.
Yeah, and many of them where we have seen it in many places, the AI continue to be experimental. People are reluctant to take it to production because they have a fear. It's just that they build it, they try it, but they're not going beyond that.
Right. Whereas some will go beyond, some will not.
Right.
Right, right. Well, thank you so much. This has been very insightful, and it's such a huge industry, healthcare, and it affects every region of the world. And the convergence of AI and everything that healthcare represents, I think, is just, so critical and so important that this incorporation of AI within the systems, the workflows, the data, needs to be done the right way. Otherwise, it can lead to some pretty devastating outcomes that we definitely want to avoid. So, with all that insight in mind, and before we conclude, tell us a bit more about Technology Rivers and what you do there.
Okay, so Technology River is a healthcare software development company. We work with healthcare organization, helping them in building HIPAA compliant software products, whether it's mobile apps, web apps, AI powered. And secondly, we help healthcare service businesses improve their operations through AI and technology, building workflows, automation, AI agents. We look at the processes, we look at the manual workflows, whatever are the different things happening. Look at what are the bottlenecks that, if automated, could improve the efficiency. The goal is to bring more efficiency in the business workflows, create more differentiator for these businesses so that they are more efficient, high value businesses.
Super. Sounds like you're in a very important and fast growing segment of the industry right now that's only going to increase in importance and in potential. So it's a very exciting space. Maybe we can reconnect in a year or two and just see how all that will have evolved in the meantime.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your time today.
No problem. Thanks for having me, Thomas.
Thank you for listening. Follow Thomas on LinkedIn